Welcome to another episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. I am your host, Graham Hall, and it's been a minute since we last did an episode. I think the last time we did a Swamp247 Podcast was back in January when we were previewing the Florida baseball team's upcoming season. As Florida fans know, that really didn't go according to plan. A lot of injuries here, and Florida ends up making a regional, but not getting out of the Conway Regional. But now we have a lot of football to talk about, and since that has happened, we have welcomed Zach Goodall to the site. Our followers and our community over at Swamp247 is familiar with him and his work. He's done a fantastic job hitting the ground running in the off season, helping with basketball, baseball, and a ton of football coverage. But our community here on the podcast has not heard him, has not seen him. So we want to briefly welcome him on. And Zach, I'm glad you're joining me as my co-host now. We're going to be doing a lot more of these episodes as we get into football season. So viewers and listeners are going to be well acquainted with you. But Zach, I wanted you to start by just introducing yourself to the community and briefly going over how long you have covered Florida and your journalism career so far, because I know it has taken you to many stops, and you have also got a lot of familiarity within the Florida fan base for the work that you did previously before joining our site. Zach, it's good to have you, man.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here with you. It's been a long time coming, I feel like, because I joined the site back in January. Got my feet wet a little bit, but really we dug right in, man. I think it was our second day when we went and had an exclusive with Billy Napier, so it was quite a start and a bit of a whirlwind. But I'm excited to be a part of the brand and to bring content to Florida fans who are obviously deserving and always looking for some. I've been covering Florida. I'm going into This will be my sixth season covering Florida. I get the numbers messed up because I did 5 seasons with a previous site, which I left last April and took a job covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for a year. And things all worked out for me to come back pretty quickly. I actually never left town. I was doing the commute to Jacksonville for 7 or 8 months before I ended up with Swamp247. But I was here for the final couple of seasons of the Dan Mullen era. First 2.5-ish seasons of the Billy Napier era. I got through spring camp before I made the move last year. So it's really been smooth sailing coming back. A lot of familiarity on my end, knowing people to talk to, having a rapport with Billy Napier and a lot of these players as well. So it's been easy. It's been fun. And I'm excited to be doing the podcast now as part of my work regimen.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to Zach providing a lot of great coverage for us over at Swamp247 as he gets into his first full season at Swamp247 covering the football team. It's going to be a really exciting time. But before we get into that, we got to go over what happened last week in Atlanta at SEC Media Days. And Zach was up there for us. It was actually the first SEC Media Days that I missed in my 10 years, now going on 11 years covering the Gators. Was a little bit bummed, absolutely, but this was not really a thrilling one when it comes to the Florida Gators. You know, I'm not going to say there wasn't a lot of excitement because you have DJ Lagway, you got so many returning starters, Jake Slaughter, Caleb Banks, fantastic players, absolutely. But I've made the point time and time again that if you're one of those teams that is under the microscope at SEC Media Days, it's two ends of the spectrum. Either people are talking about you being a national championship contender, or you've got some unsavory scandal that is in the headlines. I remember years where Les Miles would get up there and talk for 20 minutes and do his little filibuster and talk about everything he did over the summer because he wanted to avoid talking about some of the unsavory headlines that were out there about the team. He was going to limit questions. And Tennessee got up there, it felt like 5 years ago, where they got up there and they were in the headlines under Jeremy Pruitt for the cash in McDonald's bags and not wanting to talk about those topics in the offseason or arrests of players or culture issues or missing on recruits, whatever it is, you kind of want to be boring at SEC Media Days. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing to talk about, but it's not going to really be anything that is going to turn heads or surprise anyone within your fan base or even at the national level, especially when there are so many other pressing topics that are league-wide to be discussed, from revenue sharing to NIL, the transfer portal windows, the 9-game SEC schedule, you name it. You don't want the focus to be on what's going on necessarily from a negative perspective inside your building. Now, I've talked enough about it, and I just was a casual observer from outside and following and reading everything. But Zach was actually the boots on the ground. Zach, what was your takeaway from Billy Napier and Jake Slaughter and Caleb Banks and DJ Lagway's time at the podium in Atlanta on Wednesday. Anything stand out to you? Anything catch your eye? And just what did you think about how they came across from a confidence standpoint to DJ easing concerns about his shoulder injury? What stood out to you in Atlanta?
Yeah, to me, it felt largely like Billy Napier's Florida SEC media days of the past. For one, he had about a 12 and a half minute filibuster at the start, but at the same time, I guess that can be solid timing for him. I know he tends to go a little long in those like everyone else. But otherwise, message kind of feels the same. In past years, there were more negative questions, as you were kind of referencing, about like the trajectory of the program under him. He would talk about blocking the noise out and focusing on what's happening inside their walls. It was the same thing this time around, largely. The only difference being that the questions were being asked was about this 4-game turnaround at the end of last season, the positive momentum that Florida enters this season with compared to years past. That just wasn't the case. But he kept the same answers. They're trying to block out the noise about these raised expectations and hold expectations of themselves as the most important and really the only ones of relevance to them. And when we got our private session with the team, which was a bit later in the day, as they got into Atlanta a bit late and weren't able to do it beforehand, we covered a lot of the bases when it came to injuries. Jake Slaughter, Caleb Banks, and DJ Lagway all exited spring or maneuvered spring with injuries. They're all saying or suggesting that they're going to be good to go. Jake and Caleb both saying that they're 100% and going to be fine for fall camp. Lagway coming out and mentioning that he does not have a prosthetic arm, as people were starting to wonder as we got through this whole shoulder injury through the offseason, but that he also feels like he's ready to go. He's itching and crawling to get out there and play. Comes to the stuff that they want to keep a little bit more buried. When we got to our local session, we had reported over the summer about Dijon Johnson's arrest and Stephon Shiver's arrest. No more news on the Johnson front. I think that they're going to keep this internal discipline, if there is any, that gets into the season, under wraps really as long as they can go. Whereas Shivers was released from the team, as you had reported a couple of weeks ago. And that was really it when it pertained to the negatives. We got into the rev share angle, the walk-on angle, how those are being grandfathered in, and Billy Napier is a big fan of that. I think, as most Florida fans know, he's a big fan of extending the walk-on program for as much as possible. But really, I think largely things revolved around the expectations of this team, where it's at, how they're handling this kind of microscope, kind of as you said, like they're being viewed as a potential borderline playoff contender if things go as well as people on the fan base and even on the outside national landscape are starting to expect after the run that they went on last year. And at least from the way that they put it out there in this large media setting, they're trying to keep the main thing and not let these expectations get to anyone's head.
Yeah, the 4-game win streak is so fascinating how much it's come up because let's be quite honest, if you're going to have a 4-game win streak, the best time of the year to have it is at the end of the year because people are going to sit there and talk about the strides you made. There's going to be momentum going into the off season. You're going to maybe enter the next year with elevated expectations. No one remembers a team that wins 4 games in the middle of the season if they, don't live up to their expectations by the end of the year. I mean, look what happened to Ole Miss last year, a team that had a really good start to the year, was on the cusp of the college football playoff, but they end up losing that game to Florida. They see their college football playoff hopes slip away. And so it's seen as kind of a lost season given their expectations and what they failed to accomplish. On the flip side is a team like Florida that didn't have a great start, lost their starting quarterback in Graham Mertz, saw DJ Lagway go down with an injury against Georgia, but then they turn it around, finish the year on a high note, get a pair of ranked wins against LSU, Ole Miss, beat FSU by double digits, beat Tulane by 25. It really has given them 9 months of positivity to talk about how the roster is the healthiest it's been in the Napier era and getting Lagway back and what can he do when he's fully healthy. This has been a really, easy to maneuver off season, in my opinion, for Billy Napier and his coaching staff, because you're having less of the conversation about, what happened last year, the hot seat. Your conversations are pretty much all good in a sense here. You're even seeing less people talk about Florida's schedule. Last year at this time, there was so much conversation about the Gators facing the hardest schedule in the nation. And the reason that was a talking point was because it was going to be Florida's undoing. It was going to be what would keep the Gators from getting over the hill under Napier, from being a contending team. They may have improved and they may have hope, but the teams that they had to play, starting with Miami, going to Texas, taking on Texas A&M earlier in the year, this could be undoing to Florida. You're seeing less people talk about how arduous the schedule is, even though it's extremely difficult, which is kind of an interesting thing to me. It's almost like it's being avoided a little bit, because I think you could make a more fascinating argument. No coaches or players are going to come out and whine about their schedule or say it's going to be too difficult for us, because that would show a lack of confidence, that they're afraid of facing these projected top teams because they know that it's going to lead to their downfall. You're seeing them obviously come out and say, this is why you come to Florida. This is why you want to play in these types of games. We can contend with anyone. You saw Billy Napier say that at the end of the year last year, we felt like we could go toe-to-toe with anyone for 60 minutes. And that obviously is a good message to send. But I'm actually a little surprised that at this time of the year, people aren't looking around at the disparity between a team like Florida's schedule and a team like Missouri's schedule. And I hate to single out the Tigers, but go look at Missouri's schedule. Missouri's schedule, I would make a fair prediction that if the Gators had their schedule, they're winning 10 games this upcoming season. I think the only team that really on Missouri's schedule would give Florida a really good run for their money, and I don't even know if it would absolutely be a victory for this team, is Alabama. That's the toughest game that Missouri is going to play. Missouri could very well, and not to make this a Missouri podcast, could very well finish in the top 5 of the SEC. And if the Gators have one less SEC win, if you compare their schedules, I don't think there's going to be many people in the country that are going to say Missouri's a better SEC team than Florida, even if the Gators finish 5-6 spots below them in the SEC. But I digress a little bit. You don't want to be making excuses for the schedule before the games get played, because like I said, that's going to show a lack of confidence. But I do think it's interesting that people aren't using the schedule as much to talk about Florida's potential downfall this upcoming season. Maybe it's because of how they finished last year, the way they're starting the year, maybe a projected decline for some of Florida's upcoming opponents like Miami. We'll see what Georgia's offense looks like this year with Gunnar Stockton. Who knows with Tennessee at the end of the year with Aguilar? Is FSU going to be better than a 2-win team? You would think they would be, but are they going to be massively different? I don't know. People are looking at the schedule as more navigable for Florida. And I do think that that's interesting that you're not seeing it used against them that much. But expectations are undoubtedly higher, and I do think that was reflected in Atlanta at SEC Media Days. Last year, Florida was picked to finish 12th in the SEC out of 16 teams. I mean, you're talking bottom, 30% right there.
Right.
And that is not ideal whatsoever. But this year, the Gators were picked to finish 6th in the league. And there were some surprises, in my opinion. South Carolina at number 5. I think that's a good reflection of how high a lot of the media is on Lenora's Sellers. A lot of other teams, though, behind Florida that in recent years, Ole Miss, Tennessee, were projected to be better than them. So it does look like the elevated expectations are being expressed by the media with them picking them to finish 6th. Now, there's going to be a lot of Florida fans out there who rightfully are going to be like, 6 is not good enough in Gainesville. It means we're still missing out on the college football playoff. But overall, it shows expanded expectations. Zach, what was your takeaway of the Gators being picked to finish 6th? Do you think that's too low, too high, just right? And what do you make of the Gators having twice the amount of players on the preseason All-SEC teams, 8 players on the teams this year compared to 4 a year ago, and 3 of those last year were specialists, along with Montrell Johnson Jr. being on the 3rd team? What do you make of how Florida was projected from a team standpoint and a season finish standpoint at SEC Media Days?
Yeah, I think that range is correct. Really, I could understand anyone voting them between like the 4 to 7 range for order of finish. And on my ballot, I put them 5th, but there are toss-ups in there. I'm high on South Carolina for their quarterback and for their edge rusher specifically. I think that can elevate a team greatly. And if other things hit, then all of a sudden South Carolina can even do a little jump. I think Texas A&M deserves to be in that range too. And you can kind of mix some of these teams around. I know people are very high on LSU. I have LSU ahead of Florida on my ballot. It wouldn't surprise me to see Florida. I think they're capable of going into Death Valley and potentially pulling off a win there, an upset win even. And I'm not trying to definitively make that prediction right now. It just wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I could see Florida jumping LSU in a respect like that. There's just because I'm personally not as high on the Tigers, I think, as some of the media at large and fans at large are at this point. Uh, it's a tough conference this year. I mean, as it is every year, obviously, but I think that especially in that upper to middle range, there's going to be some unpredictability, and we could see teams finish really all over the map compared to how it looks on this preseason poll. And as for the teams, as it relates to my ballot and who actually made it, I had voted each of these 8 players onto my ballot. I think that they're in roughly similar positions. I don't think that many are really disagreeable, especially with these offensive and defensive linemen being so highly rated in Austin Barber, Jake Slaughter, Tyreek Sapp, and Caleb Banks. They've really fortified these trenches, at least on their starting lineup here in Florida, which is something that I know fans were looking for years. And now I think that the proof is kind of in the pudding, especially with the returning talent they bring back. All 4 of those players had options to go enter the NFL draft. Some may have gone higher than others, but one way or another, it's not like they would have been surprising exits if that's what happened. And instead they came back. And that's something Billy Napier's touted all offseason long, is that they feel they've gotten the player retention aspect of this down. And I think that can be applied to the transfer portal too. We saw this offseason their fewest amount of scholarship exits to the portal as we've had under Billy Napier, nearly by double digits. I think they finished with 15 this offseason. The next lowest was 22, 23. So that's certainly something that they can brag. And as a result, you see a lot of those players showing up high on these polls. I know that I think the big omission, SEC media at large, as well as myself, that irritated some Florida fans is I didn't have Lagway in my top 3 quarterbacks. And my logic there would be the injury concerns, really. I mean, it's not just the shoulder and what Chris Doring reported as a hernia issue going back to his time in high school, but what was called an undisclosed lower body injury all of camp. It goes back to the hamstring being at the end of last season. It goes back to entering last season with a shoulder soreness from fall camp. We've really not seen DJ Lagway fully healthy, and we have every reason to be incredibly impressed by what he was able to do in spite of that. I just am at a point now where, like, I want to see him throw. We didn't get to do that at all during the spring. And it wouldn't necessarily surprise me to see him come out and maybe not use to his fullest extent in fall camp, even if he's cleared to go and ready and they think he's healthy. And he seems to believe that he is fully healthy and ready to go too. But they've been cautious with him all offseason. They're probably going to remain a bit cautious with him. And with that in mind, like, it's tough for me to predict a top 3 finish among the quarterbacks until I actually see this quarterback come out, be sustainably healthy, and able to go the full path toward finishing in such a high regard. It's a good year for quarterbacks in this conference in particular. And I know that Arch Manning certainly is one that is questionable from some people's perspectives because of the limited amount of playing time. At the same time, you got to factor in, like, when he has played, he's looked quite good. When he's played, he's on one of the best rosters in all of college football. In Florida, while I'm certainly very high on the talent they have on their roster, I was telling Paul Feinbaum the other day, in my 6 years covering Florida, this is, I believe, the second most talented roster, only behind the 2020 team. That's kind of my logic with it. If I were going purely based on a talent perspective when I'm ranking these quarterbacks and I'm factoring out the injuries or even just injury concerns, again, it's not so much I think Lagway is hurt right now. More so, I want to see him perform not hurt and make sure it's sustainable at this point. But from a talent vacuum, Lagway would have been my quarterback number 2. I voted Sellers as the first team. I would have had him ahead of Garrett Nussmeier. I would have had him over Arch Manning. And you have to still, talent's only part of the equation. What you're able to produce within your offense is another one. And certainly I believe the weapons are there, but there are questions about Florida's offensive structure, play calling. Those persisted even while Lagway was on the field last year playing as well as he was. And injuries are another one. To me, it's the way I see it is I hear them. I want to believe that DJ Lagway is in a great spot and ready to go for the season. I want to see it for myself before I'm fully confident that he certainly is.
I think that's a wise opinion because I do see all the, I even want to call it vitriol and how incredulous people are about Lagway being left off as a top 3 quarterback. Those people got to remember that the last 6 months have been not talking about DJ Lagway's ability, but his availability. And, this is a guy who last year went through fall camp, and at the end of fall camp, he was experiencing shoulder soreness, and he admitted that in week 2, that just the workload that he had been dealing with was leading him to be in, a little bit of discomfort. And you really, since then, in the last year, much of the conversation around him when it comes to his performance and his ceiling is just how healthy is this guy? How much can we protect him to be able to do what he does? Because when he's out there, he's explosive. No one's arguing that. He has fantastic throw power. He's advanced, from a football IQ standpoint than where most freshman quarterbacks are. It's not really a question so much of, is he capable right now? Is he going to make enough strides? Is the question. Is he going to be healthy enough? Was he able to do enough in spring to read defenses at a higher rate and build a rapport with his wide receivers? All the things that he needed to work on in the offseason to be able to reach his second-year potential. That's the real question with DJ Lagway. And I do think that it's fair for many people who don't have orange and blue tinted glasses on to sit there and wonder if this is really going to happen. Is he going to be able to play an entire 12-game season? That is a fair question in my mind. And we saw what Florida's offense looks like with, dropping off from DJ Lagway or even Graham Mertz. There was a noticeable decline between Lagway and Aiden Warner. While I think Warner is going to be improved this year, their offense is going to change if DJ Lagway is not out there. The run game could still be effective, but are they going to be as explosive? I think it's a fair question to ask. And until we actually see it, if we do see it, I think people are going to be fairly going to speculate if that's going to be the case. So I understand people leaving DJ off the top 3. To be transparent, I personally put him at number 3. I am not as big on Arch Manning as a lot of the people are out there. I do think he's more athletic than people give him credit for, and they're going to have the best run game in the SEC, in my opinion, with Wisner and CJ Baxter coming back, and he's going to have a lot of talent around him where he's going to have every tool possible to be successful. But this is still a first-year starting quarterback, and I was not ready to proclaim him as a top 3 quarterback in the SEC just yet. I think there's a lot of toss-ups in the SEC this season. I understand why everyone's high on Lenoris Sellers, and I think Garrett Nussmeier is the closest thing to a sure thing from a production standpoint, because what he did last year and what LSU was able to do in their roster overhaul, what they did in the portal and what they did at the high school level, I think that Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a really, really good chance to lead the SEC in passing yards. And that was the closest thing to a sure thing in my mind. I'm still not 100% sold on Lenoris Sellers, but I think he's going to be really, really good. Is he going to be Heisman Trophy level good, like a lot of people are making him out to be? I don't know. I think the fascinating thing is that there are so many quarterbacks who have the ability to finish as a top 3 quarterback in the SEC this season that it made it really hard to pick some. You can also make a case for Marcel Reed, who Florida fans remember last year came in week 3, his first ever start, and he had more than 250 combined yards, had 3 touchdowns, led the Aggies to a 33-20 win on the road, and got better as the year improved. He's a second-year guy. I think he's going to be even better this season. I think he's being slept on a good bit. I think a lot of people are sleeping on how good Austin Simmons is going to be with Ole Miss. You can make the case for a number of quarterbacks in the league that they have a chance to be a top 3 quarterback if all goes according to plan. And if they stay healthy, injuries hit other teams, guys go down. This could be a league where you really don't know who's going to be the best quarterback. And that's what makes it so intriguing to me. So I think it's fair to put Lagway top 3. I think it's fair to not put him top 3. However way you justify it, I think there's many, valid reasons for it. So with all that said, though, talking season is nearing its conclusion. We're obviously still going to talk about it, but talking season is almost in the rear view. Fall camps are right around the corner. It's time to put up or shut up. We're finally going to make it clear whether these predictions are valid or coming to life. or they were just all talk here. The Gators are a week away from reporting for fall camp. It's right around the corner. I know there's a ton of excitement, of course. And with that being said, considering his role in spring, the expectation on the outside is that DJ Lagway will be back there throwing two Florida players in front of the media with no concerns, because that was the talking point, like you just said, in Atlanta, that he's ready to go. He doesn't have a prosthetic arm, that they fully expect him to be 100% when the season arrives. I am not so confident that he's not going to be on a snap count, that they're not going to be tracking every single throw that he's making, because like I mentioned, last fall he dealt with shoulder soreness before the first game of the season. It was obviously the issue during spring. You saw him go down with a grade 2 hamstring strain against Georgia last year in the first week of November. Injuries have been a concern for DJ Lagway. I think that's fair to say. Protecting him, managing him is going to be key to Florida's success this season. So with that said, I think that he's going to be a limited participant, just speculating here, in some capacity, even if they downplay it or portray it differently, and he's out there throwing routes on air in front of the 15-minute viewing window for the media to assuage concerns and make it seem like he's full go and could throw 400 passes a day. I think they're going to be very careful with him, even in fall camp, to make sure that this is no longer an issue whatsoever when the first game arrives. And to be quite clear, I don't think Lagway should have to throw the ball more than 10 times in the season opener against Long Island. I think that you should see Tramell Jones, Aiden Warner, Harrison Bailey, heck, throw Clay Millen out there in the first game of the season. I think that this should be a game where they don't need to use Lagway a ton. So with all that said, do you agree or disagree that they're going to maybe limit DJ Lagway's snap count when Florida opens fall camp and we get to see everything a week from tomorrow?
The first thing I agree with is, yeah, he should not need to throw more than, I mean, shoot, 7 to 10 passes against Long Island. If he does, I think that says a lot about this team as a whole and maybe being overrated, but we're going to not get into that because that just shouldn't be a thing. Yeah, I could see them being cautious. I don't necessarily want to speculate as to what that would look like. I think the best thing for them is that they limit our, being the media and reporters, availability in practice to where we get to see those routes on air. Now, granted, like there's some reporters, and I don't mean to pat myself on the back too much, but like they're, I think even mostly collectively, really even the entire beat would be able to tell in those 10, 15 minutes of watching him throw passes if something's not right, if something doesn't look good. But at the end of the day, it's 10 to 15 minutes. They work in a rotation. He'll throw 1 to 2 passes at a time, step back for a minute, come back and do that again. It's going to be very limited for people to make an assessment as to what he looks like. And then after that, we're out. We don't get to see anything after that. So when it comes to running team drills, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, strenuous activities where he'd be throwing the ball at a faster pace or more intense pace, we wouldn't get to see that. And I'm sure we wouldn't hear if he was being held out of those directly from Billy Napier. That is, maybe from behind the scenes. But that would be the best thing working for them. I'm sure, matter of fact, I would guarantee they're tired of hearing what people have to think about this injury and how it's gone. DJ Lagway making the joke about not having a prosthetic arm, I think, was a perfect example of how he just doesn't want to hear about that anymore. And granted, I think they're fair questions coming from the outside, and we're going to find out one way or another, whether it's in the next couple of weeks, again, the couple of weeks, first weeks of the season, as the season goes on, whether or not they were valid questions or overblown smoke at this point. It wouldn't surprise me if when we are not in there, they dial it back a bit, make sure he's good, continue to let him do what he was doing in the spring where, he's going through installs, he's helping effectively coach the quarterbacks and signal call. So when it comes to the point of like him developing his mental acuity and better understanding of the offense entering year 2, I do appreciate the approach they've taken. It's not like they've just completely sidelined him and made him watch from the sidelines. He's still been active in learning and I would imagine that that's what they would continue to do if there's any hesitancy relative to overthrowing him. But that's something we're going to have to keep our ears low to the ground on, because when it comes to those 10 to 15 minutes we get to watch routes on air, I would imagine that, to prevent any sort of backlash, drama coming out, they'll have him throwing to the best of his ability. And if so long as he's able to do that, we'll be able to judge what that looks like. If he looks like the DJ Lagway of last year when he was letting it rip across the field.
Yeah, we're going to find out really soon here. It's fun to speculate upon, but we're so close to finding out what the plan is here that I'm kind of almost in wait and see mode. But before we get out of here for this episode of the Swamp247 podcast, I got to put you on the spot one more time. It's not all about DJ Lagway, arguably the most exciting player at Florida, especially to the outsiders who may not be familiar with the ins and outs and the third and second string guys across Florida's roster. But DJ Lagway is pretty much all but set in stone as Florida's starting quarterback, right? That's probably one of the few. There are some sure things on Florida's roster, but that's probably the most sure thing heading into fall camp. With that said, there are several position groups that I am intrigued to see how the battles shake out. Before I let you get out of here, I want to hear what is the one position group from a competition standpoint that you are most intrigued to see unfold here in fall camp? One you're going to be paying attention to, tracking who has the lead to win the job here. Which one is it right now, a week from fall camp, that you're most looking to see this upcoming fall camp?
Let me give you a quick three, but I've got one that's above the other two. I'm bullish on Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown being potential contributors as freshmen, especially the former. I think Dallas Wilson is a special talent who, paired with Khalil Jackson's injury concern entering the season after his ACL injury last year, I think that even if Khalil Jackson were available, Dallas Wilson, to me, based on his high school tape and orange and blue game and what we've seen in practice, is truly the best X receiver that is on this roster, or at least has the potential to be the best X receiver. Boundary guy, play him one-on-one. He's got physicality at 6'3", 220, but he's fast and a sharp route runner at the same time. So, I mean, when you've got a freshman like that, another freshman in Vernell Brown, who's more of the intermediate to short, electric slot receiver, J. Michael Sturdivant, even Nashawn Montgomery, and just all these additions paired with some returning talents, Eugene Wilson coming off his injury. Wide receiver is one that, as we're looking at the quarterbacks especially, that's going to be catching everyone's eye, and it's going to have my eye too. The offensive line, to have as much chemistry that they have coming back, it's nearly 3,000 snaps from last year alone, including Bryce Lovett's playing time. I want to see if it's even possible for them to make significant strides, because all of these guys played very well last year. Protection was great for Florida. Run blocking was great. Can it be even better? Because if so, there aren't going to be many defensive lines that can penetrate it. But when I look at the top, my number one, it's interesting because College Football 26 put it as the lowest rated position group on the entire roster. I think it's way closer to the top, and it's the linebacker core. And I understand probably why there is some skepticism on those ratings crews' parts, because some of these players are, younger. Miles Graham and Aaron Childs going into their second season, both having played, I think, fewer than 150 snaps last year. Grayson Howard coming off the injury. Jaden Robinson's largely been a rotational player and spot starter while Shamar James was here, at least. So I understand that EA may not be banging the table for that group, but that is a deep linebacker core, man. I think that those are four players who can contribute on a down-to-down basis. They all do things exceptionally well, and they all do different things well. I think that Grayson Howard's a true Mike. I think that Miles Graham is a true Will, who can go sideline to sideline and hold up in coverage. Aaron Childs, I think, can do a bit of both, and he's probably a better downhill player, but you can even make him your Sam. Let him rush the passer. Let him be an extra simulated rusher, whether it's against the run or the pass. Jaden Robinson's another fit, I think, at Mike, who covers within the box very well and is a strong run defender and can make plays in the backfield. You even look at Ty Jackson, the freshman coming in, someone who Billy Napier said is, I believe, the best high school film that he's watched in his time with Florida, or at least some of his favorite. And while I would, maybe hold off on setting high expectations for him as a freshman, because linebacker is is one of the more difficult positions to play that young in your college career. There's so much reading, keying, diagnosing, dropping into coverage, or going against the run, or blitzing. I wouldn't expect him to necessarily put up 200 snaps as a freshman. Paired with that very deep core in 4 players ahead of him, it'll be tough to carve out a role. At the same time, I think that there's room for him to take the field and offer these players a breather. So you're talking 5 deep at realistically a 2-player position. To me, that I think they have fantastic depth there. I think they have immense potential there. And the best thing going for them is Grayson Howard's a junior and Jaden Robinson's a junior. Childs and Graham are sophomores and Jackson's a freshman. So unless, Jaden Robinson and Grayson Howard come out and have good enough years to go and enter the NFL draft, this is not just a 1-year thing, I think, at linebacker. I think that they've got a potential multi-year situation going here where that should be one of the strongest units on the team.
I got to say, I'm surprised at a couple of your answers. Offensive line, I think, was behind quarterback for me is the most sure thing. I think that this is the first fall camp in recent years where Florida's going into it with their 5 solidified in a sense here. I do think there's going to be some competition, obviously, and Bryce Lovett needs to continue to work. And Najee Harris, big things expected out of him in his second year as a starter, but seems like a sure thing there. And, linebacker, getting Grayson Howard back. I know a lot of people have already proclaimed, Miles Graham as the next, great thing coming and at the will linebacker spot. But, that is an interesting one. Absolutely. Before we get out of here, I'll give my 2 that are really interesting. Interior defensive line, getting Jamari Lyons back, keeping him healthy for fall camp is huge. You have Mekhi Barrow right there as well. But they did lose a lot, losing Cam Jackson and Desmond Watson, no longer having Stephon Shivers on the team. That's going to be a positional battle where I'm really intrigued to see how it shakes out. Or it could be one that's not really that interesting. Jamari Lyons could run away with it because he was impressing last year during fall camp. If he's back or improved from where he was a season ago, this could be just him locking down the role, and Mekhi just is a rotational piece for Florida. And then I think corner is obviously a really intriguing one as well. Devin Moore has got to stay healthy this year. He's just had such a bad run of injuries throughout his time at Florida, but when he's been on the field, he's been so impressive. So, if he's dealing with an injury, they're going to need to develop depth there. It's going to be a battle between Cormani McLean and Dijon Johnson for that other outside cornerback spot. And I'm really intrigued to see how it all shakes out. I've been told Cormani exited spring as the leader to win the job, but Dijon Johnson played more last season. I think he had nearly 500 snaps last year, stepped in as a starter and played really, really well, battled through injury. And I know he had the off-season rest, but I don't think that's going to factor into whether he's going to end up having a chance to start, even if he has to sit for the first half against Long Island. So I'm really intrigued to see how that shakes out. Are the freshmen going to be involved there as well with Javari Flowers and Onis and, Ben Hanks III? Is the next great freshman defensive back already on the roster at Florida? We saw Jason Marshall Jr. come in and start as a freshman. Jordan Castell started as a freshman. Jordan Castell actually, beat out some older guys as a freshman and was starting by week 2 at Florida. Are we going to see that from one of these guys if Florida maybe is a little dissatisfied with their other options at corner, or if they have another injury there? So that is absolutely one or 2 right there that I am tracking, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds. It's going to be tough to obviously glean a good bit from those 15 minutes that we are out there, but obviously we're going to be talking to a ton of people, getting a lot of information on how things are going. And I'm really looking forward to fall camp getting up and running. It's been a long off season and it's finally come to an end. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Swamp247 Podcast. Really appreciate Zach joining me. We're going to be doing a lot more episodes more consistently as the season gets here. We're aiming for 2 a week. Going to be previewing each game for Florida the day ahead of the game. And we're going to be breaking down what we learned from the week prior earlier in the week. So a lot more content coming to you over at Swamp247. But that's going to do it for us. For Zach Goodall, I'm Graham Hall, and we'll see you next time.